Independence Day!
Huh?
No!
Hello everyone, welcome back, and welcome to my review for Christopher Nolan's new movie, Oppenheimer. Oppenheimer is, of course, written and directed by Christopher Nolan, and it stars Cillian Murphy, Robert Downey Jr., Florence Pugh, Emily Blunt, Matt Damon, and about a million other cast members who I can't name because there's just too many, so those are the main ones. The lead up to Oppenheimer has been both very exciting for me and filled with speculation. Now, before I get to the movie itself, I want to talk about kind of the lead up to Oppenheimer and some of the behind the scenes things that were happening, because I feel like it explains and gives context to a lot of the how and the why of Oppenheimer. Now, back in 2020, when Christopher Nolan released Tenet, it was the first wave of COVID. And so Warner Brothers saw that that film kind of underperformed during the first wave, and they decided, okay, we're going to release our entire 2021 slate for the next year simultaneously on HBO Max as well as in theaters at the same time. Now, anybody who's a big fan of Christopher Nolan understands how much of a proponent he is of both the theatrical experience as well as analog film stock, which is, you know, he tries to film everything on analog film, 35mm, 70mm, and especially IMAX 70mm, as well as try to project his movies this way, which is becoming increasingly rare these days. Now, understandably, the WB plan for HBO Max really upset Nolan, as during this period of COVID, it was nobody knew what the future of theatrical exhibition was going to be, because everybody was locked inside. They were just watching movies on streaming or on Blu-ray in some cases, and nobody knew if people were going to go back to the movies. It was kind of a scary time for Hollywood. And when you, as a big studio, release your movies this way, simultaneously at home and in theaters, you know, it's a business model that seems to encourage people to go watch their movies on HBO Max or whatever streaming service it gets released on, because, you know, why would you pay a ticket to go to a theater, especially during a pandemic where you could get sick, or you could just pay your subscription cost and watch it on your TV at home with no other people there.
Yeah, it's sort of not how you treat filmmakers and stars and people who, you know, these guys have given a lot for these projects, and they deserved to be consulted and spoken to about what was going to happen to their work.
So the fallout of this decision kind of made Christopher Nolan realize that WB kind of no longer valued the theatrical exhibition experience as he did. Now, this was the previous WB regime. They've kind of gone back to promoting theatrical releases since the new people took over. But yeah, during this period, they didn't really value what he valued, and so he decided he was going to jump ship to a new studio. Eventually, Nolan got in a bidding war with Sony and Paramount and a few other studios, but eventually Universal won the war with the other studios, and so he made Universal his new home and decided that Oppenheimer was going to be his next project. My excitement for whenever Christopher Nolan releases a new film is akin to when Tarantino or David Fincher release a new movie. You know you're in for a rare experience that only these days comes around maybe once a year, once every 2 years, because you know that these filmmakers are really valuing cinema as an art form. And what I mean by that is that these filmmakers work in kind of the blockbuster big studio movie space, but they are providing challenging material to an audience, and these movies will get widely seen by a lot of people, and they are going to stick in the minds of the audience a lot more than just your average sequel or whatever new movie is coming out that weekend. Now, what was especially exciting for me this time around was that my local theater, Scotiabank Edmonton, was getting an IMAX 70mm film print. Now, they haven't gotten a film print of anything since Dunkirk, and that was 6 years ago. And it was really cool to see that they still had the film projectors, because, you know, there's only 30 places in the world that can show the movie this way. So it's a very privileged experience to be able to see the movie in the format that Christopher Nolan intends that you see it in. And, you know, showings for this version have been sold out for like the next week, if not longer than that. So it shows that there's a demand for this. Also, many other locations in the world are getting just a standard 70mm print as well as 35mm prints. Not near me, honestly. Like, the only place that I can see it on film at all is the IMAX 70mm. So, I mean, that's pretty awesome anyway. That's the best way to see it. But if you're in the United States especially, you might get to see it on 70mm or 35mm. Whichever film format you are able to see Oppenheimer on, I implore you to see it on some kind of celluloid analog film. Now, digital is the standard of the industry now, and 4K laser projectors and some of the amazing digital cameras like the Sony Venice can produce really awesome and crystal clear, sharp images with HDR and all these other things. So I'm not knocking digital cinema. I know that it has a place and it is awesome when used correctly. But film, for one thing, it's so rare now that, like, why wouldn't you see it this way? It's a dying thing, and I hope that it doesn't completely die out, but it's so rare that you might as well see it this way. And also, just from a viewing standpoint, it's one technically higher resolution than digital in the ways that they measure these things, but also it's hard to explain. It's like this living artifact that you're witnessing when you watch a movie on film, and it almost transports you back to like this kind of golden age of watching movies where, like, you know, it's just you in the movie. There's no digital experience that you could have at home. There's no distractions, hopefully, if you're in a good theater where people aren't talking or on their phones. And it's just kind of you're fully immersed in whatever you're watching, and I feel like this definitely applies to Oppenheimer. Now, the screening that I attended for Oppenheimer was the very first Thursday night showing at the local IMAX in Scotiabank Theatre, and the theater manager came out prior to the screening starting and stated that you know, it took them a long 6 months to get this film print together and getting the projectors in working shape again, as well as hiring a retired projectionist to come in and run for the engagement this film. And he also stated, and I'm not sure if this is just him implying or if this is their plan, but he stated that they think this could be the final time that they screen a movie on film in any way at this theater, which, if that theater stops showing film, 70mm IMAX, the only film projector that's going to be left in Edmonton will be the Garneau Metro Cinema. Love that theater, but it's, you know, it's very old school, and it's 35mm. I don't think they can show 70mm there. It's just 35. And so I really hope that this isn't true, and I hope that the demand that has been shown for Oppenheimer on 70mm is kind of showing them, hey, you know, if the studios release movies this way, we can make a lot of money doing this. But also, I just hope that, you know, they just value the art form itself. And you know what? You can keep your digital projectors. Obviously, they got it on a rail system to have both projectors. So why not? To me, that's really the only reason to go to that IMAX, to be honest, because in its current state, the seating's not very good, and just it's not comfortable to sit in there. But, you know, it's worth it to see a movie shown this way. And so I even wrote a email to David Keeley, who's the quality control manager of IMAX, and I kind of stated what my concerns were and like this whole thing, and just kind of imploring him to maybe get them to reconsider. Now, there's been a lot of reports of screenings for Oppenheimer kind of having some technical issues, and this did happen to us, but I kind of chalked this up to a couple things. So what happened was the first 30 seconds of the movie had no sound, because when you do an IMAX film print, you actually can't fit a soundtrack on the film strip itself. So you have to play it off of a DVD and kind of sync it to the movie. and it sounds great. It's really booming. It's awesome, but they didn't have it for the first 30 seconds. But right after that sound came in, it was good. And then there were two instances. I think it was the gate of the projector coming down, because the entire picture just went black and the sound went out. So, so that happened twice, and this was all in the first 20 minutes of the movie, and it was fixed pretty quickly. And for the rest of the runtime, it's a 3-hour movie. For the rest of the runtime, it was fine, like no issues at all after that. So really, to me, those issues didn't detract from the experience at all. I heard reports of some places in the States where the entire movie was just, something happened and they couldn't restart it and they had to just cancel the showing. So if that had happened, I would have been more upset. But in my opinion, our issues were really not, they were pretty trivial. And they even gave us like a courtesy pass to come back and see whatever movie we wanted in the future. So that was nice. And to me, again, that wasn't really, it's not worth complaining about. I just wanted to highlight it because other people had been having issues too. So to kind of sum up and finish the rest of this little side note on film and film projection, film can only be experienced with a projectionist working in the booth, running the film print, and especially with IMAX 70mm. It's the only true way to experience Oppenheimer the way Nolan intended, but the biggest point is that I think you should see Oppenheimer in any theater, even if it's a digital version, because this movie was made to not be experienced at home on its initial release. Nolan has no problem with Blu-ray or watching it on your phone even, but it all comes trickling down from that theatrical exhibition release model. The first way that anybody should see Oppenheimer is in a theater. So just go seek out any theater you can, but especially 70mm IMAX if you have one close to you. Okay, now that my little rant or whatever you want to call it is out of the way, let's actually get to Oppenheimer itself. So Oppenheimer, to me, feels like the film that Nolan has been building to for his entire career. The themes of obsession and humanity's kind of self-destructive nature have kind of permeated a lot of his movies, especially like The Dark Knight Rises with the nuclear bomb subplot and kind of the way Gotham kind of turns in on itself, and The Dark Knight as well with the Joker's sort of moral question that he poses in that movie. And then also with Interstellar, especially, I think, because that's a movie about humanity's future and kind of where we're going, and we kind of led to our own destruction, and we have to kind of find our way out of that. So when taking on J. Robert Oppenheimer's story, Nolan was presented with a unique opportunity to not only remind audiences of what a grand theatrical experience could be in the context of like a dramatic film that wasn't like a big special effects showcase, even though there are some really good effects in this movie, but also to kind of address some of these concerns that have been in the world ever since the Trinity test, and kind of, there's some modern examples of, kind of a pivoting moment for us, like the use of AI, where it's like, you're opening this Pandora's box of something potentially catastrophic to our society, and who's responsible for that, and also, is it morally right to unleash? To put it simply, Oppenheimer is my favorite movie of the year so far, and possibly Nolan's magnum opus. The craft of everything in this movie, from the production design to Hoyte van Hoytema's amazing photochemical process cinematography that uses the IMAX black and white photography for objective scenes from Strauss's point of view, and then the color scenes from Oppenheimer's point of view, and this sort of vintage look that was kind of developed by Kodak for this movie is just immaculate. Everything is firing on all cylinders from a filmmaking and technical perspective of this movie, but also the script is so snappy, and moves at such a fast pace that the 3 hour runtime really just kind of breezes by, and it's like everything is working at maximum capacity for what is a pure cinema experience. I also really want to mention, like I said with the cinematography, they use IMAX in this movie, not in the way you would expect. You know, I even got into an argument with somebody on Twitter about how, like, they think that it was a bad use of IMAX in this movie because they expect it to be used for a grand vista or an action sequence like Nolan's used in his other movies. But I think it's quite brilliant the way that IMAX is used in this movie. It's used as an intimate format, getting those extreme close-ups on faces and kind of bringing you right in close with what is happening in a dialogue scene, because it's like it makes you feel like you're in it with them. You're right in that moment with Oppenheimer and kind of feeling what he's feeling because the screen's so massive and it's like right in your face. It's almost like a form of 3D in that way, but even more effective in my opinion. So I think the IMAX use here was great. And also Ludwig Göransson's score here is the best he's ever had with Nolan. You know, I was very disappointed when for Tenet, it was because Hans Zimmer used to be his collaborator for everything, and for Tenet he switched to Ludwig and he did a great job on that movie. But here he almost plays on like some horror notes with his little cues that he puts into the runtime of the movie, and it's so like haunting and like almost methodical in how it's placed at just the right moment to, like, again, put you in the subjective position of Oppenheimer. Now, on a performance and acting point of view, all the cast is fantastic. You know, it's a massive cast again, as I said. But the two standouts are Cillian Murphy. This is his signature role that he will be remembered for sure. I know that his career is going to boom even more after this movie. He's definitely going to get an Oscar nomination for sure. And Robert Downey Jr. He plays Louis Strauss in this movie, kind of I don't want to give too much away, and also, you know, it's historical, so there's a lot of moving parts there, but he plays kind of he has this rivalry role, let's just say, against Oppenheimer, and this is the best dramatic role I've seen Downey in probably since something like Zodiac. And so I think both those two are like the standouts of the movie, even though everybody does a fantastic job. But again, they get the most screen time, and it's Oppenheimer's story first and foremost, but Downey also gets a lot of screen time as well. Okay, now I'm going to put a spoiler warning here, because to end things here, I want to talk about the film's ending. And I feel like I need to actually talk about it in order to finish this off, because it's the entire linchpin of the story, and it's the moment that stuck with me the most after seeing Oppenheimer, and so I need to talk about it. Here's your spoiler warning. So while the Trinity test has been kind of marketed as the film's climax, it's not quite. It is the showstopper of the movie for sure. It has some amazing practical effects. It's really amazingly done, and it's tense and suspenseful, and the sound design's great. But it's about 2/3 of the way through the runtime. It's not the ending of the movie. The ending of the movie is what really sticks out to me as the true thesis of what Nolan was intending with this movie and why this story is even being told. So throughout the movie, we keep kind of going back to this scene where, you know, the Trinity test has taken place, and it's shown in kind of a non-chronological order, as Nolan likes to do, and it works to kind of set up the structure. But it's a scene between Oppenheimer and Albert Einstein, and it's kind of discussing where Oppenheimer's public perception is going to go and what that means for him. Now, Louis Strauss, who Robert Downey Jr. plays, has been trying to get revenge in a way on Oppenheimer over a public humiliation that happened with him, and they have this rivalry throughout the movie, and he's trying to kind of go after him for Oppenheimer's some of his political leanings and perceived anti-America stance that he may have, and his relationship to communism. And in this scene between Einstein and Oppenheimer, you see Oppenheimer sort of say something to Einstein, and Strauss is standing at the back kind of watching them. And this is before any of the rivalry has happened between them. And Einstein is walking towards Strauss. Strauss tries to talk to him. Einstein just walks past him with this kind of mortified look on his face. And Strauss perceives this as he said something to Einstein, Oppenheimer said something to Einstein where he is basically turning the scientific community against him, and that's why he perceives that is the reason why he doesn't get put onto the presidential cabinet near the end of the movie, and that's why he is defeated ultimately. However, I think it's his assistant, played by Alden Ehrenreich, says to him, maybe that's not what he said to him at all. Maybe it has nothing to do with you at all. And it's a great moment because it kind of shows that Strauss is so full of himself and kind of, thinks everything is about him. So it turns out, yeah, it wasn't about Strauss at all. The conversation is finally shown in its entirety at the end of the movie. And basically it is Oppenheimer recalling how there was the slight possibility that when they pushed the button that they would send off a chain reaction, ignite the Earth's atmosphere, destroying the world. And early in the movie he says this to Einstein, and they discuss the probability of that. And so Einstein says, yes, I remember this. Why do you bring it up? And Oppenheimer just stares into the camera and he says, I believe we did. And that is the most haunting and brilliant final line in a movie I've seen in a long time. It's played over these shots of the rockets, of the nuclear missiles going off, and Ludwig Göransson's score just kind of booming in the background as it kind of goes in on his face, and just the movie ends on that. And it's truly chilling. And this ending was so deeply affecting to me because it's an indictment of kind of where our society has been going for so long and where it continues to go. You could say, oh, he didn't destroy the world when he pushed that button, but he might have set off a chain reaction of events that may eventually lead to that. I don't want to be pessimistic, and I don't necessarily believe that's the case, but it's hard not to be pessimistic with some of the state of, nuclear tensions. I don't want to get into it, but just, if you've been watching the news, you know what's going on. So it's a brilliant way to end the movie. So I could do an entire video essay on this final scene alone. I'm not going to do that, so I'll just wrap up the review here. Like I said, see Oppenheimer as soon as you can. See it in a theater. Don't wait to watch it at home. You need to see it on the biggest screen possible, and you need to support what Nolan's intent was with this movie. It needs to be experienced in this way. Films like Oppenheimer prove that challenging blockbuster cinema can come out and do extremely well. The movie made $80 million its opening weekend. It went behind Barbie, but obviously Barbie's going to do better than an R-rated historical drama. But $80 million is still the biggest opening for Nolan aside from his Batman movies. So this was a big win for this type of cinema, and it shows that audiences will see it and that they're hungry for stuff like this. So studios, take note. Stop betting on safe. I know that safe is a good thing to do sometimes, and it is what the industry has been kind of built on the last little while, but I long for times like the 90s, the 70s. Obviously I wasn't alive during most of this, but I've seen movies from these eras, and those were the best decades for movies because they were these big studio movies that took chances and were challenging and weren't just straight and narrow. So please take chances on movies like this, release them, give them bigger budgets. Don't give them so big of budgets that they need to balloon to an insane box office just to break even, like Indiana Jones and The Flash recently. But please take chances on these movies. So my final verdict for Oppenheimer is my most enthusiastic yet, 10 out of 10. It is my favorite movie of the year so far. So thank you everybody for watching. This was my most involved and complex video to make so far. So if you enjoyed it, please leave a like, a comment, subscribe, share it with your friends. It would really mean the world to me. Thank you, and I'll see you guys again soon.